Hello. Let's talk about trust. I was put in mind of that by the last video I made, in which I criticised a woman who goes by the name Jamelia, who, for a reason I shall never fathom, was given a platform on the Jeremy Vine show to tell the world that old people shouldn't have the vote because, well, I'm not entirely sure why, except that she said they've had 30 or 40 years of voting, so they should be happy with that. You know, like if you've had 30 or 40 years of breathing, then perhaps you should be happy with that and give up. Every time you exhale, after all, you exhale carbon dioxide, which, as we all know, is a greenhouse gas. Save the planet is what I say. Stop your old people breathing. But that aside, first of all, I have to say when I made the video, I thought that Jamelia was about 18, and it turns out that she's a full-grown woman. I wouldn't have believed it remotely possible that such juvenile drivel could come out of an adult's mouth. Good grief, I don't think I've had my presuppositions so badly shaken since I realised that Theresa May didn't really mean Brexit means Brexit. However, back to Jamelia and the knowledge that stupid, unlike looks, never fades. Now, I've not finished with Jamelia because I spent some time thinking about her idea. The idea that old people should lose the vote when they get their pension. And it reminded me of the Ten Commandments. No, not the film. I mean the original ones, the list we get in the Bible. Now, some of you who've been long-time residents of this channel will know occasionally I make excursions into the Bible. And I do that because it is, or should be, the main anchor point for Western society. And as a student of literature, I know quite a bit about the Bible simply as the literary tradition. And the reason I remembered it this time was the fifth commandment. Bet you don't remember which one that was offhand, yeah? It's the one to do with your parents. Okay, I had an old-fashioned Bible education, so I learnt all the stories. And I might say, I got beaten up in the playground for being the only girl in the class who knew that Paul the Apostle was executed in Rome. No one likes a smart-ass. However, the real meaning of the stories didn't really hit me until I started studying literature. You see, the stories of the Bible are, well, somewhat obscured by the way they're taught. Everything is regarded as revelation of some sort. The prophets, for instance, we're taught to regard them sort of like fortune tellers and not as what they really were, which was angry people stomping about the countryside, warning everyone that their behaviour was going along the wrong track, like Christopher Hitchens, for instance, or Bill Hicks. God, I miss them. Anyway, over the years, I changed my attitude to the Bible, and now I approach both of the books in the same way that I learnt to approach any other literary work. When you look at the Bible like that, you can learn a lot. I'm not talking about what the vicar says the words say, but what the words themselves actually say. And having studied Semitic languages at university, I could go back to the original and see the discrepancies in the translations. And the most important discrepancy, which gives everyone the wrong impression, is the words, the Ten Commandments, because the word actually isn't commandment. It's a word in Hebrew that's closer in meaning to the word declaration. So it's really the 10 declarations. That's important because it tells you what it's for. It's a basic list of how a society has to behave to remain a society. So I'll just touch on the last 5 to start with. Don't murder, steal, don't commit adultery, don't commit perjury, not lying, perjury. It's lying under oath that's forbidden, and don't covet. These are all rules that have to do with the trust people must have among themselves to conduct their daily lives. I'm not going into more detail because that's not what I want to concentrate on. What I really want to discuss is the first five, especially the fifth, as I said. The declarations start off with God reminding the Hebrews that he rescued them. That's the first. Then he says they shouldn't worship idols. That's the second. And they shouldn't disrespect God's name. That's the third. And then he says they should observe the Sabbath altogether, which is the fourth. And you'll notice that these are all practices to do with the focal point of the society that was being built by Moses out of a rabble of escaped slaves. Whether that stuff came from God or from Moses or from later writers actually doesn't matter to me. What matters is what it's saying, and that is that in order for people to make a society, they should have one focus. In this case, that's God, around which their society should revolve, and they shouldn't disrespect that focus or be distracted from it. And of course, that's why multiculturalism is so bad. It splits up the focus until it's in little pieces and it's meaningless. In Britain, as a British society, the focus is supposed to be the royal family as a concept of Britishness. In America, as in many republics, it's the flag. In other countries, it's a dictator of some sort. But there's always that focus. And if that focus gets fragmented, then that's the end of that society. Right, then we get the fifth declaration, and this one says, honour your father and your mother. And this is the one I find most interesting because of where it's placed. It's right next to the rules to do with God. Apart from that, why is it there at all? The next five are all to do with more concrete stuff. What does honouring your parents have to do with any of this? And why is it more important than refraining from lying, stealing, and murdering? Even more strange is what comes next, because honour your father and your mother isn't the end of it. After that, God, or whatever, explains why people should follow that rule. It goes, honour your father and your mother so that your days will be long on the land God has given you. Now, most of the time, God never explains himself. I have to interject here. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I have to confess to a real problem believing in God myself. I'm using the word God because it's there, and it's a useful shorthand for a particular concept. Not a man with a beard sitting on a cloud, just the origin point for these, what you might call 10 rules for life. Back to God. The God of the Hebrew Bible gives orders. He very rarely bothers to justify them. And I think it's worthwhile considering why in this particular instance God takes the time to explain this particular instruction. What he's saying, or what Moses is saying, or what whoever else it might have been who set down these rules is saying, is if you don't respect the lives of your old people, your society is over. It's not only that your life will be shorter, but even the land will be pulled out from under your feet. And my theory is that it's because of this. Bringing up children is a horrendous commitment. It's a commitment of time and money and even a loss of social status in many cases. And if you can't trust your kids not to turn on you when you're old and helpless, why have kids? It just wouldn't make any sense. And that's what's happening in our present Western society. People are having fewer and fewer children, and sociologists are all wondering why. So they start asking about whether there's adequate childcare, and that's a factor, of course. And then more people live at a distance from their families now, so they don't have the backup of granny babysitters, and that is another factor. But what doesn't seem to have occurred to anyone is that it might be because there are too many people around like Jamilia. People like Jamilia, they know how they feel about old people. And so they expect their children will feel the same about them. And they don't like that idea, so they just don't have the kids. Why bother when you can spend that money and the spare time going on holidays and still have change left over for the old age home when that becomes necessary? That's much more reliable than kids who think you shouldn't even be allowed to vote when you get old and useless. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you wish to donate, it's through PayPal at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.